Hey there, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Evoke Greatness. This podcast was created for those of you who, like me, are driven by their curious nature and fascination with the champion mindset. If you have an insatiable hunger for growth and knowledge, or maybe you're just curious on how some of the most successful people have navigated their journey, we share the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, and all the lessons learned along the way. It doesn't matter what chapter you are on in your story. Maybe you're just getting started, or heck, maybe you're halfway through. What I know is where intention goes, energy flows. It's my most sincere hope that you will hear something in one or maybe many of these episodes that resonates with you and reminds you that you are not in this alone. As we venture into year 2, I hope that you find a sense of connection and community when you're here, because we all deserve a place where we belong. My name is Sunny, and I am so glad you're here. If you're new, there's a few things you want to know about me. I am a huge book nerd and a wee bit of a control enthusiast with an obsession for motivational coffee cups. I believe that a rising tide raises all ships, and I invite you along in this journey to evoke greatness. Welcome back to another episode of Evoke Greatness. Today, I have the privilege of hosting a guest who embodies the essence of evoking greatness in herself and others. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Kyera Kacey, author of the book Rich Bitch Money Goals, intuitive business mentor, and transformational leader who's been making waves in the world of personal and professional development. Kyera is renowned for her unconventional and powerful approach to empowering women globally. Through her transformative international retreats and programs, she's helped countless women pursue high-level transformation, challenging them to bring their highest truth and self-expression into every aspect of their lives, authentically, powerfully, and unapologetically. Kyera's philosophy centers on the belief that life and business are extensions of who you are being. She's made it her mission to liberate women worldwide, helping them unleash confidence, evolve trust in their psychic abilities, and fiercely claim what she calls the rich bitch version of themselves. Kyera guides women to allow their intuitive channel to lead them, transcend borders, align with their soul's purpose, and infuse the highest frequency into their life and business. From overcoming divorce and trauma to mastering manifestation, Kyera's own journey and tools she's developed have inspired and transformed lives across the globe. So we're in for a treat today, and we're going to go over all things. We're going to go in all directions. First of all, Kyera, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I always love to dive in. My first question is to figure out, how did you become the version of Kyera that you are today?
Oh, it's such a loaded question. I love the question. It's loaded. I have been in personal development since I was 17. So I got a really early head start. I was always the youngest in seminars. And I knew at my first seminar, I was watching the seminar leader on stage, and he was working with this man, and I witnessed real-time transformation, like right in front of me. And I said in that moment, that's exactly what I want to do with the rest of my life. And so it really started at a very early age. I always knew that I was going to be, I didn't like school. I hated school growing up. Even when I was in elementary school, I felt like this is not going to have anything to do with my work in the future. So I just always kind of known that I was here for the work I'm doing today.
What led you to, at such a young age? I think back to, my gosh, I didn't find personal development myself till I was 35 freaking years old. And I think back to God, if I could have found that 15 years earlier, what was it? What was the catalyst that made you go the direction of self-development that early?
Yeah, I was really fortunate that my high school boyfriend had actually, his mom got him into personal development. And so it started off, maybe some listeners know, maybe they don't have heard of Landmark Education. Landmark Education served me at the time. It's not something I would do today. I've really evolved beyond that. But at the time, that is actually what got me into Landmark, was my high school boyfriend. And it was because I was dealing with a lot of trauma. And he was like, listen, I think this is going to be really supportive to you. So that was really the catalyst into that experience. And I do remember, sitting in those seminars, and I would look at people who were 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. And I thought, if I don't heal now, that's going to be me someday. And I just was unwilling to to live my life in stress. And so I was facing a lot of demons at a very early age.
Just kind of kicking off with that, you've overcome divorce, you've overcome a lot of trauma in your life.
Yeah.
How have those experiences shaped you and your perspective on just human resilience?
You know, so when I was 15 years old, I was raped by three men, and I overcame that at 19. So when I say overcame that, like, there's no emotional charge. I can talk about that like I can talk about ice cream. There's nothing that would trigger any sort of discomfort. And for me, I realized, and the thing is, the healing of that, it was so fast. And what happened was I was in this seminar and I was witnessing these people who were much older than me. And I realized, and at the time I was 19, and I was still very traumatized from that experience. And the way that I handled it was I became very, have you ever heard of the term resting bitch face?
Mhm.
It was kind of like, I'm just going to be really outwardly seem very angry so that people leave me alone. And that was kind of like my safety mechanism. But what I realized was that was costing me love and vitality and joy and trust. And so what happened was I was in this seminar one day and I was witnessing these people who were much older than me, 20, 30, 40, 50 years older. And it was kind of the same thing. I thought, gosh, if I don't let this go and forgive and create that space for healing, like, I'm going to be angry at 50 and angry at 60. And I just was unwilling to do that. And so, for me, what that's done for me is it actually allowed me to experience just how quickly we can release trauma. I think that's kind of triggering for some people to hear, because a lot of people say there's no timeline for grief, and they're right, there's not. But what I personally have discovered is that we can actually move through grief very quickly if we choose to do that. And so it just became my mission to heal every aspect of my life, so that as I was teaching this work, I was the embodiment of what I was teaching. I think, it's one thing to study something, and then it's another thing to actually have experienced and walked it in real life. And I think that makes a profound difference in the level of work that I bring to my clients.
Yeah, and how much you talk about self-love rituals in a lot of the
Yeah.
work that you do. How much of that is almost the opening of the pathway to self-forgiveness, forgiveness of others, almost the processing of a lot of the traumas that we pick up. And to your point earlier, it's like some people have held on to those traumas for their entire life. And so
Yeah.
talk a little bit about your self-love rituals, and then how much does that contribute to building confidence, building positivity, and being able to see the world through a different set of lenses?
I've always been very self-expressed. And so, even when I brought my business online, I had this unwavering belief and faith and desire in what I was creating. And I was also just unwilling to show up anything less than authentic. And I recognized very early on that people were going to love me for that, or they were going to hate me for that. But I made this decision that if people were going to love me and they were going to work with me, they were going to do that because they were getting the real version of me. And if they were going to hate me, they were going to do that because they were getting the real version of me. And I find that it's actually the flip side for most people. It's like you still deal with that judgment, but a person oftentimes is not actually feeling or being fully self-expressed. And if people look at my content or they look at my social media, there are definitely a lot of times where maybe my pictures are more revealing or I'm wearing less clothing. And that's something I've dealt with, where a lot of people have been triggered by that and they've expressed that to me. But what I tell them is I can only know this amount of self-love because I knew the contrast. Like I knew a lot of self-hate. I was addicted to cutting for many years of my life. And that was also something that I overcame. And so my expression today is only embodied because I've walked through the different layers of, self-hate to self-love. And I think that self-love gives us permission really to do anything. If you're going to leave an unhealthy relationship, you've got to love yourself enough to do it. If you're going to pursue your dreams, you've got to love yourself enough to do it. So to me, it's the foundation of everything that we do.
Yeah,
Easier said than done, but necessary work.
for sure. I love how you framed that. For some reason, like I've never thought about it like that, around the contrast between the two. And so to be so far on one side of self-love, to have known what it's like to be so far on the other end of the spectrum, that is something I'm sure that resonates deeply with people. But it's interesting to hear it framed like that in the real moment, because I've never thought about it like that. But it really does. It amplifies those emotions, because they're amplified emotions regardless, one side or the other,
For
right?
sure.
And
Yeah.
love and hate of self, of others, of things is of almost the same emotion, but
Yeah.
fueled by something different.
Yeah. Absolutely.
How have you use intuition and you say that that plays a big role in your work?
Yeah.
How have I think there's probably a lot of people that are skeptical about intuition even. You refer to it more as like a psychic ability. How would you frame that in a way where it would allow people to open up to what they actually have inside of them and how they can use it to serve themselves and others?
Yeah. I actually really dislike the word psychic because the moment we hear that, it's similar to like if you hear the word hypnosis, it tends to divide an audience. You have an automatic listening to that word. But the reality is, we all have experienced at some point in time an inner knowing to something, right? Even if you've experienced meeting someone for the very first time and you're like, I don't know what it is. I just don't like this person. I can't put my finger on it. And it's like, that's your intuition, that's the senses at work. And so for me, it's not your intuition or psychic abilities, whatever you want to call that. It's not a superpower, it's something we're just born with. But what I have found for most people, so I was born very open, my channel was very open, and what I mean by that was I would see, know, hear, and feel things like since a very early age, and that has definitely helped me with my work. But I'm also human. So there were a lot of times where my intuition was leading me to do something and I ignored it. And then I paid the price. And then I would have an opportunity to, do it again. And so I find that when it comes to our intuition, here's what I tell people. Your intuition will make all the sense to your senses, but more times than not, it doesn't make sense logically. And so I have found for me, especially in business and what I've created, the moves that I've made from my intuition, they never made sense on paper, but it always worked out. And it always took me exactly where I needed to go. And so I find that the more people can honor their intuition, which most people have spent a lifetime not honoring it. So they're like, I don't even know what that is. The biggest thing for most people is they can't distinguish, that inner voice between that and fear. So it can be confusing for a lot of people.
I've had a lot of this conversation. A large portion of my audience is professional, senior, and executive level women. And
Mm.
I've had a lot of this conversation because I think, especially in business, especially the higher you climb, people do not want to pay attention to that inner knowing that we have. And what would you say to those people who don't rely on that? Rather, it's like, well, I'm analytical. I want to look at the data. But I
Mhm.
think that there's something missing when we don't pay attention to that gut instinct, that inner feeling
Yeah.
that we have. What would you say to those women who maybe dismiss it?
I feel like that's like only ever trying chocolate ice cream and you're missing out on strawberry or vanilla or caramel. It's like you're just missing out. Like you might be like, this is so good. Like your mind is great. Like that logical part of you, like our minds are designed to keep us safe, but that's also something to pay attention to, right? My mom used to always say to me growing up, like, Kyra, the best place you can be is out of your mind. And I always took that to heart. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with being logical, but that's like being in your masculine energy all the time and missing down on the feminine. So for me, I find that to just be a lack of balance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, your work emphasizes something that sounds like it wouldn't belong in the professional side of things. And it sounds controversial, which is I love it. But you talk about being naked, free, confident, and turned on in both
Mhm.
personal and professional contexts. Can you share a little
Yeah.
bit more about what that really means and how is it applicable to women for life and business?
Yeah. Well, I always say you can make money anyway, but the work that I do with my clients, it's like if you're going to make money, then why don't you make money using your gifts and really having everything you're doing being fully aligned with your desires? And so, when I was going to college, I was going to get a degree in psychology and I dropped out 2 years in because I thought, I just can't envision myself in an office, unable to hug my clients and use my gifts and really be the level of self-expression that I just naturally am. And so I dropped out and I opened an office at 24 years old and I had everybody that was coming to me was older, 50s, 60s. I had 70-year-olds coming to me and I was terrified because I thought, what are they going to think of this woman who's so young? I remember being like, God, if I could just be 35, now I'm 36. But they always came back. And so kind of to even go back to the question you had about intuition, the reason they came back, yeah, I had tools and I was great at what I was doing, but it was also like I was hearing everything they weren't saying. And so if I didn't have my intuition playing in the background, that probably would have looked very different. But for me, I've just allowed myself to be myself in all aspects of my business. And that has also been really refreshing for people, because when you meet me in person, it's the same as you get online. And I just find that that's very rare, but people are craving that level of authenticity and truth. And so I just find just wouldn't do business any other way. Like, there are going to be some people, and they've made it clear they're very uncomfortable with the way that I am, or with my self-expression or my confidence or my nakedness, whatever that is, right? But then those are just the people that are not for me. And I think that's the other thing people have to recognize. Like, you're not here to be everything for everyone, but for the people that you're for, like, the more that you are fully self-expressed and unleashed in that, that's a frequency people get to experience, and it's rare.
Yeah. And I think some people, to what you said, is there's a division. Sometimes it's a word that kind of triggers people to automatically be on one side of the fence before they fully even understand the meaning behind it. Do you agree that some people are just committed to committed to not being willing to understand you?
Yeah, 100%. I think, not everyone's a frequency match. So even like, if somebody is just judging me, even off of, like, let's say my book, Rich Bitch Money Goals, well, that word bitch is triggering for some people. And unless you know me and you know what it stands for, you're probably going to have a discomfort with that or a judgment to that. But what that word actually stands for is a woman who believes, invests, trusts herself. She consciously creates her life, and she's heart-centered, because those are the principles in everything that I've done that's created success. And I'm not just talking success in the bank account, because that's irrelevant. There's millionaires that commit suicide all the time. So we know money is not a measure of success, but how you actually feel about yourself. So this is why I say, like, internal success for external results. And that's what I'm interested in.
What was the driver behind writing this book? Who was this book for?
I grew up with, like, money for my family was not really there. And so my experience of money was we never had any, or there was never enough, and paying bills was difficult. And, I was in debt. And when I went through my first divorce, I couldn't afford my mortgage and I couldn't pay my bills. And I just had this moment of going, I remember I was sitting on my bedroom floor and moving through my divorce, and I was totally heartbroken. I was, I think, 29 years old, or 28 or 29. And I thought, if I've had all of these years of personal development and I've got all these tools in my toolbox and I've been working with clients, but I'm this stuck going through this divorce, and I'm in this bad of shape financially, like, what are other women that haven't even had access to the training that I've had? And there was this moment of deciding that I was going to change my life, and I was going to change everything about my life. But I also was really committed to changing my financial circumstances. And so I had this drive and this desire to heal and experience that change for myself. And then I wanted to teach it to others. And growing up, I was really fortunate that my mom and my stepdad were very much into the law of attraction. And so I was already familiar with the principles. I was just not putting them into practice. And so I started shifting gears with my money mindset and how it was relating to money. And I started cleaning up a lot of the debt that I had, or the way I was handling my debt. And I completely changed my life and my finances. And so this book was written for the man or woman who has a desire to change their life. That's who this was written for. It's like all the principles, everything that I did, I just laid it out in this book.
What do you talking about manifestation and that type of focus? What do you think is the biggest misconception? Because there's not everybody buys into that, right? It's like, well, no, not I can't make this happen for myself. What do you find is the biggest misconception about manifestation, and how do you help people kind of turn the dial on how they view that?
Yeah. I think manifestation is another word similar to psychic or hypnosis. Like, it can divide an audience. Like, it's like people associate it to magic, and magic isn't real, right? And so that word sometimes automatically shuts people down. But if you were to think about it, right, like, where you place your attention is where you place your energy, and where you place your energy, something grows. And so, I always tell people, if you don't think that your thoughts actually create your reality, then just why is it that people can actually change their physical chemistry by thought alone, right? You can think about something and then feel arousal in the body, and things will chemically start to change in the body. And it's no different if you have a thought about lack, or you can think about something from your past and you will actually start to generate those feelings as if it were actually happening. The brain can't tell the difference between a thought alone or an actual experience. And so I have found that for people that don't, the reality is I actually don't try to convince people of this work. It's like the people that come to me actually have a desire for it because I believe we're all entitled to our experience and there's no right or wrong. And I always tell people my way is not the right way, but it's a way. And it's a way that has worked. And so if you're interested in it, hop on the bus. And if you're not, there's a million other buses, So for me, I think it's just one of those words that people get sometimes uncomfortable with because they can't connect how this would actually change their life.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of people, eh, probably more so in the world today, post COVID, and I hate to even say that anymore. Like we're past it, but it has changed the way people exist,
Yeah.
and sometimes in a really heartbreaking way. And I think some people, they may feel like they're successful on paper, but when it comes to how they really feel inside, they feel empty.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's achieved those things on paper, but really doesn't have a sense of fulfillment?
Well, I find most people don't actually know who they are. When I was going through my first divorce, what I realized was I didn't know who I was independent of my husband. And so I had this like aha moment of who am I without him? And so that was actually where my first book, She Without He, came to life because I realized most women and, men too, but most women, because we take on the role as caregiver, they don't know who they are independent of mom or wife or sister or girlfriend or mother. And most people have been conditioned to follow a set of rules rather than honoring their intuition that's saying, maybe you could be a doctor, but your heart's being called to something else. And so there's always, for most people, been this tug of war of logic and heart, intuition and desire, So I find that just most people don't actually know who they are, which is why they're bored or they're not actually allowing themselves to experience what they deeply desire because God forbid they're honest about it and then they're not accepted.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think the process of ascension requires a lot of courage because you're likely going to be moving away from a lot of things and people that are no longer a frequency match if you decide to pursue your highest timeline in life, business, relationships, all of it.
Well, and it's like with anything, right? If we take in all that we can, like there's a point where you almost can't take in anymore without cleaning out the old. And that is habits, that is relationships, which are probably one of the most challenging things. But there
Totally.
are parts of you, if you truly want to grow, that have to die off. And you shed these things to allow for kind of the birth of new things within yourself. And so
Yeah.
that speaks so eloquently to it, because I think so long as we are staying kind of stuck or full in a way that's not serving us or those around us, it's like a sense of stagnancy, or almost even like a sense of slow death, because you're
Yeah.
not allowing anything else to come to life.
Yeah. And a lot of people are doing really great at surviving life, but they're just not very good at living it. And I find like, especially for women, that oftentimes I see that in the marriage that they're in. And I know for me, like when I left my second marriage, that was very challenging to do, but I recognized that it was not, I was like, this just isn't as good as it gets for me. Like this is not aligned. And I knew I can't speak to liberation in my work if I'm not liberated. But the problem is we have a lot of people in their work that are speaking to things that are not actually embodied. And so there's this frequency mismatch. And that is something that I think people are starting to notice more and more as a wake up call to change.
Yeah. Well, and then there's this pull between, I call it a fluid balance, that there are some that say you can have balance. There are some that say you can't have balance when it comes to work, when it comes to life, when it comes to all things in life. You talk about alignment, and how can people start to align with their sense of purpose when they feel that sense of being trapped?
Yeah. Permission to just start taking the smallest step toward fun and freedom and desire, even if that's something as basic as you want an ice cream cone and you don't overthink it and you're not like, but I said I was going to do this. It's like, just go have the ice cream. Allow yourself to actually be in play and be in pleasure and be in joy. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to take 20 steps ahead. Just take the first step.
For those people who there's a sense of maybe a disconnect, because you talk about the frequencies, right? And really being aligned.
Yeah.
When there is that disconnect and they're trying to find that way, maybe it's just, again, not everybody can leap into things, right? And sometimes it's about like the smallest baby steps. But what are some of those things where there is forward momentum, there's action they can take, but it's not the big, giant, scary leap? What are some of those
Yeah.
like things that they can at least start to peel back to move forward?
I feel like this is a really unsexy answer, but the reality is most people don't have a relationship with themselves. Like they don't even know, right? Like if a woman says to me, I don't really know what I want, I will say, you're lying to me. Because if I ask you what you don't want, you're going to list it off. So you've just spent more time getting familiar with and knowing everything you don't like, everything that's not working, everything that turns you off, and less time actually exploring everything you do want, everything that does turn you on, everything that does excite you. And so it's kind of like if you start dating someone and you never make time for them, you're going to be disconnected. And it is the same thing. Like most women don't have a relationship with themselves. They don't make the time. They're too busy with, their obligations, children, whatever that is. And it's like, at the end of the day, there has to be a willingness to reconnect with self and actually cultivate a relationship with self so that you can start to hear what that next step is, so that you can start to actually honor when your intuition is saying, okay, we got to move and this is the direction we want to move.
What is a popular opinion of the world that you don't buy into, you don't subscribe to it?
God, there's so many. I think especially now when it's like election time and everyone gets, a certain way around that. I'm just unwilling to believe that my life is dictated by world events. Um, I really believe I'm the creator of my life despite anything that's going on. And so for me, I feel really free. I don't feel fearful when things are changing. When the crowd is going one way, I'd rather stand still. I think that we can have it all, that we're unlimited. And I think people are really stuck in the conversation of limitation.
Well, as we wrap up, I always love to ask this question. If it was your last day on earth, and of all the things that you have taken in, you could impart one piece of advice, what would that be?
I would say go bigger.
Mm,
Go bigger. Whatever you think you're already doing that's great, go bigger. I promise you're probably playing way too small. Go bigger, go bigger, go bigger, and don't wait. I think to delay anything is just to stay in a program of fear. And so I would say go bigger and don't wait.
beautiful. That's it. That reminds me of a study that I think it was done with the Marines, and it was like special ops Marines. And they were saying when the average person thinks they are giving their max, they're actually only about 40%.
Yep. Yeah. I
And
tell
so
my
that
clients all the
beautifully,
time, go bigger.
yeah,
Or when
that
they
beautiful
celebrate a
line.
win, I'm like, this is just the beginning. Yeah. I love that. It's true.
Well, Kyra, thank you so much. I appreciate being able to dive in with you. I would love to know, for those who want to find out more, where can people find you and follow you?
I would say just go to my website, KyeraKacey.com, or I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. I've got an amazing team. If you reach out, they will support you.
Excellent. We'll put all of the links in the show notes as well. Kyra, thank you for fully showing up for us. Appreciate you and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for listening and for being here on this journey with me. I hope you'll stick around. If you liked this episode, it would mean the world for me if you would rate and review the podcast or share it with someone you know may need to hear this message. I love to hear from you all and want you to know that you can leave me a voicemail directly. If you go to my website, evokegreatness.com, and go to the Contact Me tab, you'll just hit the big old orange button and record your message. I love the feedback and comments that I've been getting, so please keep them coming. I'll leave you with the wise words of author Robin Sharma. Greatness comes by doing a few small and smart things each and every day. It comes from taking little steps consistently. It comes from making a few small chips against everything in your professional and personal life that is ordinary, so that a day eventually arrives when all that's left is the extraordinary.